Welcome to Women Unheard. I'm your host, Katrina Foster, and today I have with me Amy Christieson, the here we go again, founder, speaker, and chief growth officer of Amy Christieson Co, and honestly, a very dear friend of mine.
Oh, thank you.
I am so glad that you are here with me today and that you have traveled all the way from Georgia to be here.
Yes, yeah, I'm glad to be here. The weather's beautiful.
A little hot for me today, but I will get by. It's always, I don't know why I get amazed by how hot it gets here.
It's a different world than the Northeast.
So I don't know. I think maybe we can tell folks how we met first, because I always feel like, to me, it's an interesting story because I think I shared this with you, but like we met last year at the Leading Ladies Women's Conference, and you were there with a client of yours.
I was,
and I kicked you first. I kicked you. We were sitting by each other. I kicked you by accident. And I remember thinking,
I forgot about that part.
Well, yeah, because I was like, I was tired, I was stressed. I mean, the normal for me these days. But I remember thinking, oh my God, her glasses are so damn cool. I was like, that woman is so chic. I really feel like I need to know her. But then I was like, I was in such a weird space because like I had just had a baby and I was tired. I felt all goofy about me. Like, I don't like, that time period. I don't know, I think I'm still in it, but not as much as I was then, where like you're like really kind of insecure about yourself because you have no idea where you are in the world.
Right.
For me, I was like super sleep deprived, as I still am, but back then it was way worse. And so, but then you talked to me at the end of the event, and I was like, oh, I love this lady already.
Yeah. It's interesting that was how you were feeling, because all I saw when we met was somebody I wanted to know. And when I was sitting there and I was looking at the creative that your firm had created for this particular event, I had an event coming up and I was like, I need that level of creative for this particular event that I was working on. And I just was so impressed by the program booklet and the table tents and how everything was just pulled together from a messaging standpoint and a flow standpoint. It wasn't just the creative, it was all the things. And I knew the longer I sat there that you were involved in some way, shape, or form with many of the pieces and parts of that particular event. So I'm looking at it saying, this is a woman I need to know because she's super talented. So that was where I was coming from. You're welcome. You're welcome.
Well, and I feel like, and this is really interesting, and I really wonder how many people are going to have something to say about this, but I literally was looking at all the things going, that's not right.
How funny
and this
is
isn't
that?
okay. And God damn it, where did that happen in the program? Right? And so I was like feeling a little something, because like, as you know, because we worked on an event together, like for those kind of things, everything is always like ends up being last minute.
It does.
And
it's terrible,
so, yeah. It's so stressful. And like, there's usually something that isn't quite right.
Right.
But I really wonder how many men in my field would be at an event picking through all the things, feeling kind of funny about it, or if they're just like, this is amazing and this is so perfect and I don't think twice about it. Meanwhile, I'm like, oh my God, I wonder if anybody noticed that.
Right. And meanwhile, I'm sure no one did, right? I'm sure no one noticed anything. Yeah. They just noticed all the great pieces because we're not immersed in it like you were immersed in it, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, incredible. It was It was a great event. I made some wonderful connections that day, but this really was the beginning of what I hope is a lifelong friendship for us.
I know. I feel that I really do feel so, and I feel so fortunate because last year I met you, and I feel like we are going to be friends forever.
Yes.
I mean, I would probably stalk you if you're like, we can't be friends anymore.
No stalking required, I promise.
Because like I feel like every time we get on a call, even for work, like it just ends up being like such an amazing conversation. I always feel like I take something away from what we've talked about, because we always end up talking about, spirituality or health or family or whatever. And I'm like, oh, yeah, what great insight.
Yeah. Well, it's and some of it's just flat out girlfriend talk too, like the check-in, the girlfriend check-in, and I love that, right? I need more of that in my life. So I always really have an appreciation for those moments when they happen.
Yeah, me too. And then this year I met Jamaica Haynes, who was just on my podcast Tuesday at the Leading Ladies. Like I felt like the universe kept putting us together.
That's nice.
And I don't know that she and I will be as close as I hope you and I are or will be and continue to be, but I feel the same way about her. Like she is like super dynamite, and she has a very interesting story and things that I am always like. I'm not blind to the news, right? I know what goes on in the world, kind of. Not really. I try not to, honestly, because it is so damn depressing. But just, still the things that she faces as a woman of color on a daily basis, and like the ridiculous stereotypes and racial stuff that is just so prevalent. Even here, like I just find like maybe in the Northeast, like I wouldn't be as shocked, but like I don't know. I feel like in the South, like how is that still a thing? Honestly,
right.
Anyway, so let's talk about you.
Okay, sounds great.
So I don't know. I feel like you have like such an amazing story of how you got to where you are now, and you have this amazing women's program, which I'm so sad and so jealous when I saw all the photos that you put up of the women's executive leadership retreat. Right?
Yes.
And that I couldn't make it, and probably better that I didn't, because I probably would have just found a corner and slept the whole time.
Right. Maybe next year.
But like you're doing a lot of really amazing things, and I feel like you bring so much to the women, especially that I've gotten an opportunity to work with, that you also work with. And I just feel like it's such a great place to start. How'd you get there? Where are we going?
Yeah.
And then I was talking about this with my nanny this morning. She's like, "Oh, what are you guys talking about today?" I'm like, "Oh, balancing the masculinity and femininity and, business and life and how that shows up." And I was like, "Gosh, Amy has such a good story about this." And she looked at me kind of funny, but she's like, "Oh." And I think it's also because like I might not have said it very eloquently, because I had like 30 seconds of sleep last night, and I was trying to make coffee and shower and
get ready. Yes.
So where'd you start? Let's talk about that.
So interesting. I mean, I left home at 17 and never went back. I knew there was something different out there for me, and I knew I didn't want to be where I was. It was a great place to grow up, but it wasn't where I ever saw myself. So I stumbled around, and I've lived in some really great places. I lived in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which is a super cool Midwestern city. Most people wouldn't think, but it's really...
It's a big running community there.
Yeah, it's an incredible community, people. I lived there for a short time, and then I actually ended up moving to Phoenix. I lived there for 11 years, and I ended up getting into, I had a variety of different jobs. I started a couple of little businesses and did some entrepreneurial things. I've always had that entrepreneurial spirit. But I ended up taking a job sort of as a side hustle at a brokerage firm where they sold benefits, they sold investments, they did retirement planning, and I literally answered their phone from 12 to 5. I had the afternoon shift, and I fell into that business, and the people that I worked with were really amazing humans, and I saw what they were able to do and how they were able to help people build, financial wealth and financial legacies for their children and their grandchildren. And I just sort of fell in love with that part of the industry. I think really first I fell in love with the people I worked with, and then I fell in love. And I had this woman who, I'm inspired to video message her. I haven't talked to her in oodles of years. But her name was Phyllis Sensman, and Phyllis was in a man's world. It was definitely a male-dominated industry, but she was just a powerful woman in that space, and I always admired her. I mean, she was always dressed to the nines. She was extremely well-spoken, and she had her own little brokerage within our brokerage that she ran, and she just impressed me day in and day out. And I really had never had exposure to any woman that was like this. And so I found myself realizing what was possible. I don't think I even knew in life what was actually possible. And then I see her, and so I start observing her, and then I start observing other women, our clients. We had some really powerful female clients. And it was incredible when I started to really think about what was possible. So that's how I ended up in the employee benefits space. Fast forward, I ended up relocating. I lived in Denver for a period of time, staying in that same industry. Then I ended up in Buffalo because I met my husband, who is Canadian, and we moved to the last United States exit that you could move to, so we could travel to reach his mom, and we were still living in the States at the time, so we wanted to live on the U.S. side of the border. So,
and just a quick shout out to Polly, because he is really amazing. I do love him.
He is really amazing, my Canadian husband. He really is amazing, and honestly my biggest fan, and I feel so fortunate and blessed. And so I, again, still in the same space. 2009, I had really just done a turnaround on another agency that I was working for. And I was like, I just don't know if I can do this again unless it's for myself. So in 2009, I actually started my own employee benefits and HR consulting agency. Meanwhile, all this time I'm living in the man's world because this was a male-dominated industry. And, you know, at the time, I mean, way back when, we weren't even allowed to wear pants. We had to wear skirts and pantyhose. That's the way it was, and heels. I mean, that's...
Even in 2009?
Not in 2009.
Okay.
It was prior to that when I was living in Phoenix. I mean, that was our dress code until we had some powerhouse saleswoman coming in that lived in New York City and said, I have a lot of pantsuits and I'm not going to do it. And she refused. And so then we got to wear pants.
Oh, I love her.
Yeah. She was a powerhouse. And so things started to change in the industry and you saw more females. But what was interesting about that industry just in general is, you know, primarily the women were in support roles, right? They were administrative, they were account management, you know, they weren't typically the feet on the street that were selling, they weren't at the leadership table, they weren't, you know, there were not a lot of female-owned agencies. There were, you know, no female CEOs and founders at the time. And what was interesting about what happened in Buffalo for me is before I started my agency, I actually worked for an insurance company. And what I did, because I served the broker market when I worked for the insurance company, so brokers who sold insurance products, I gave them the product. So what I did was I learned about all my competition in the Buffalo market, which was incredible because I could see who was really great and who maybe wasn't as great. And there was, you know, 5 or 6 firms that rose to the top that were really something you would want to emulate. So then in 2009, when I started my agency, I knew how to position that agency to be a winner because I knew what I was up against because I had just worked with all of them that I was up against. Out of all of those agencies that I was up against, there was one that was female owned that sold right before I started my own. So at the time in Buffalo, I was the only female owned agency because they had just sold to a bank. And it was interesting. You know, I used a lot of what I learned growing up in the industry and being in those service roles that were really set aside for women, to learn every aspect and every dark corner of the industry so that when I put it together, I had a really deep, thick understanding of how things worked inside of an agency from an insurance company perspective, from a brokerage perspective, from a people and human perspective, from a client perspective, from an operational perspective, because I really had worked in all of those roles. So I was able to infuse that knowledge into the agency that I started. And then I was able to just put a feminine twist on it and make it different and better. And what I did was I just made a high touch agency that niched into mid-sized companies and offered them a better service model than anything that was out there that my competition was doing. And it just had that feminine touch to it. And that is really what helped me be successful in that space. I later added an HR consulting division. We did third-party administration. We did all kinds of things inside my agency. And then January 1st of 2020, I actually sold that company to a regional bank.
What great timing.
It couldn't have been better.
The universe was smiling on you.
The universe was smiling. And what was interesting about that particular transaction was, you know, my company was not for sale. I was approached and I was made an offer that I said no thank you to. And 6 months later, they came back to me and said, would you consider coming back to the table again. And I said, I would if we can talk about a real offer and not go back to where we left off before, because we might as well not waste our time. And they were open to that. And we had we sort of rekindled our discussions, and they became, productive. They made a little bit more sense for me. And I really looked back at my life, and I looked at, that stretch of my life really served me in terms of being able to help companies, being able to grow employees, and being able to be a mother. My goal when I started the agency in 2009 is I don't ever want to miss a hockey game. And my son played travel hockey, and I want to be there for him. And what did that mean? That meant sometimes I'm sitting upstairs behind the glass with my laptop out, but I was still physically there. And we had our car time, before cell phones, where you're fully present and you're having conversations with your child. And those moments were the moments that I started the agency for. I mean, I had no idea how much work it would be, but it didn't matter because I knew it gave me the flexibility that I needed to show up in a way that I wanted to show up for my son. And so I'm forever grateful for that. So when it came time to sell, he had just finished college, and I thought, maybe this has served its season of life. What's my next chapter and what's in it for me? So I sold the agency. I stayed on for almost 2 years just through the transition. And then I started Amy Christieson Company, and I really kind of looked at what are all the things I loved the most about, my past, and how can I continue to help people, because I do believe that that's what I was called to do. And the people side of the business was my favorite side of the business. So I thought I need to do something in the consulting space where I'm working with other women and really teaching them how to show up as a whole human instead of your work human and your personal human. That was a tipping point, a changing point for me in my career when I melded those two together, and how to bring your femininity into the workplace in a healthy way that serves you and serves your company. So that's really where my program, Amy Christieson and Co, was born, but also where my programs, they're all rooted in that whole human, female-focused philosophy.
Oh my God, I love that.
Yeah.
What a boss move on all accounts. And kudos to you for being able to know what you needed and how you needed it to all kind of play together, right?
Thank you. Yeah.
I think that's really hard, especially because you were young too, right?
I was young.
Yeah. So I feel like as a young woman in that time, that's I feel like nobody really knew that then, right?
Right. And what's interesting is, looking at things from a 30,000 foot view, when you step away from your business or step away from something you're about to create, and you really just stand up and you look at, all the pieces and parts of it and how it goes together, you really can build great things. And, your successes and your failures, all become part of that, right? All your lessons learned, I won't do this, but I will do this, and I might try this. I feel like if you take all of that experience and pull it all together, you can do great things no matter what field you're in, no matter what you're creating. I mean, you could be creating a product, you could be creating a service, adding to an existing business, you could be building a business from scratch. But if you have the ability to do that and honor all the moments you had before you got to that moment and use those moments as tools to build something new, I think you get the best of you when you do that.
But how hard is that for everyone to do?
It's hard. It's hard. And I think, I had so many helpers along the way. I had people in my life that helped me understand what was possible, how to tap into certain areas of myself that I didn't even know existed, helped me honor and ignite my passion for things, helped me heal in ways. I had coaches and mentors along the way that through whatever season of life they were with me at, made a remarkable impact in how I'm able to show up today. So much so that this morning before I met with you, I was enjoying my coffee at my hotel, answering a couple of emails, and I just was overcome with gratitude for one of my greatest influencers. And she really helped me see some of my blind spots. She helped me heal in some of the dark corners of my life. At the time, I mean, she was there for me when I needed her most. And honestly, she, her business acumen helped me build something from zero to saleable. She was part of that season of my life. And I feel like she's with me all the time when I'm out doing what I'm doing now. Like, I feel like I've brought the lessons and the learnings and the teachings from her into what I'm doing today. And I think it's given me the confidence to just say, I'm going to do this again. I know I built something and it was really hard and there was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that went into it. And I'm 52 years of age, but I'm going to do it again. And it's because of people like her that have been there beside me along the way.
Oh, yeah. I know. I feel like, for me, I feel like it was so hard to have female mentors coming up. I do. I mean, I feel like when I first started my agency, I remember, I was 23 years old, but what I did was I reached out to all the area agencies, just kind of introducing myself, because even at 23, I think I was open enough to know that, like, there's enough work for all of us.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yes.
But my competitors, and frustratingly, especially the female ones, were basically like, piss off.
Yeah, right.
And I really hated that. And I don't know if that's like a part of what fuels me to be so passionate about supporting women, and why I have always made a point to mentor young women and have had so many amazing young female interns. I mean, this quote I recently heard that I really love is that a good mentor, hopes you'll stay, but a great mentor knows you'll go.
That's right. Yeah.
And while I've hated saying goodbye to so many of them, they've all gone off and done some really amazing things.
And that's what you wish for, right? I always want to leave people better than I found them. And I want them to look back at their chapters and say, this woman played a part in who I am today. Like, the same things I say about the coach I was just talking about, I want them to say those things about me, and I want them to feel like I was a big part of their journey, and that I helped them grow in ways that they didn't know that they could grow themselves, right? You want to be part of that fabric of who they become, right? Because there's a lot of people out there that will influence them, and maybe not in the best way, right? Or, what we see a lot in the executive female space is, women are trained to show up like men in the workforce. And the reality is, that's not what the world needs right now. The world needs feminine leadership. And when I say feminine leadership, I mean, we're wired differently, period, end of story. And the difference is that we can bring unique things to the workforce that maybe our male counterparts aren't wired to bring. It doesn't mean you're not strong. It doesn't mean you're not powerful. It doesn't mean you're not a, ferocious negotiator. I mean, it just means you have something special that you can bring. And, women who can find that sweet spot where they're bringing what they need to be a strong leader, but also leaning into their femininity, I find, at least in my experience, those are the most successful leaders. And I've also seen a lot of leaders that show up that way and they're not aligning with their company because that's not what their company wants from them. So what do these ladies do? They choose instead. They go elsewhere. They go where they're appreciated, where they're needed, where they're wanted, and where their leadership skills can make a company flourish.
I will say that in my 20s, I absolutely, and probably in my early 30s, I absolutely always showed up with masculine energy. Right. Always. Because I felt like that was the only way people paid attention to me. Right. Well, also, I was pretty cute, but But you know, like I can't tell you how many times I thought about this morning in the shower. How many times, you know, in my late 20s and 30s, like I had been out with my male colleagues or counterparts or clients drinking till all hours of the night, smoking cigars, right?
Yeah.
But I will tell you, having done that, I will say, not once did I throw up on myself or have to excuse myself to go to the bathroom to throw up my shoes. And if any of my male colleagues are listening, which I don't know that they will, if you know who you are. I mean, but I do, interestingly enough, those few folks, we've worked together for over a decade. And I love them. And they've become very close friends of mine. One of them, used to call me a dude with boobs.
Oh, how funny. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
And it wasn't until, I mean, for me, it wasn't until I had like major stress and loss that I was like, this is just, I don't know, is this really working? Is this who I really want to be?
Right.
Like, because I think I didn't know that I was missing something. And like a piece of me,
right?
But I definitely was, right? And then, you know, you and I have had conversations about this. Is that I not only showed up that way at work, but in my personal life, right? Like, I very much was very strong with men for the longest time. Oh God, I'm going to share this, and this is probably TMI, but I'm gonna. And I pray my daughter doesn't listen to this episode one day. I literally, personally, used to have a rule with men. I was like, 1, you're not dating me. 2, don't tell anybody. 3, don't fall in love. And 4, I'll save that one because it's really personal. But it does relate to intimate time. But like, I literally would be like, this, and this. Don't call me. I'll call you. Game out. Right.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you shared that because I see that a lot with our leaders, our leaders, our feminine leaders that are in CEO roles, C-level roles at the decision-making table. I see this with them, and it's a struggle that we talk about in our women's executive leadership group. It came up at our recent retreat in Hilton Head, and you know, it really is one of those things where we almost sometimes feel like we're two different people, right? We have to show up this way at work and this way at home. And, you know, the reality is again, it's finding that sweet spot. So where you're looking at work to find that sweet spot of masculinity and femininity, when you get home, you know, you're looking for that sweet spot as well, because you need to show up for your partner in a way that works with your relationship, right? And I was having a conversation with one of our female executives, and we were talking about switching. Like, you know, I'm working, I've got the long to-do list, I'm directing my, you know, team of individuals, and then I have 2 minutes and 32 seconds before I'm at my door of my house, and now I'm a mother and I'm a wife. How do I make that shift, you know? And we joked about it, and we said, you drive around the damn block. Like, don't go right home. Like, have a minute for yourself. You don't have to go, you know, from one to the other immediately. If you need time to shift, being reflective enough and creating the space for yourself to shift into that mindset, process your day, honor the day that you just had, and then honor the fact that when you open that door at home, you know, it looks a little bit different than the place you just came from, and how you need to show up also might look a little bit different. And I'm not asking anybody to not be their authentic selves, but it's just women are so complex, and we have so many sides of ourselves, and we are expected to be so many things to so many people. We have to give ourselves the space and the grace to allow us to show up in a way that we're needed, where we're needed, right? And, you know, I remember when I had my agency, there were times where even in my CEO seat, I would get in my car and drive around the block, and then sometimes circle it 2 or 3 times, because I just needed a minute and by myself, sometimes to cry, sometimes to yell, sometimes just to process a thought, and I needed privacy. And even though I had an office door, there was something about changing my environment that allowed me to open my mind a little bit. And I did it quite often, actually, and it was helpful to me. But all that was creating grace and space for me to process whatever it was I was trying to process in that moment. We often just run from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing, and then we're like, how come I can't show up, or I don't feel like I'm winning, or I don't feel like I'm successful in any place. I'm like, marginally average at all the things I'm doing, and I'm not good or great at anything. Well, because you've been given an impossible task, right? You've been given an impossible task. So I believe that it's just finding that sweet spot within you in the different places and spaces of your life, like girlfriends, right? Like, how are you showing up for your girlfriends? Well, not the same way you're showing up as the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. You're showing up a little bit differently. You're probably tapped into your feminine energy in a completely different way. And it's not because you're not being authentic. It's because you're just tapping into that piece of you, because that's what your girlfriends maybe need from you. So,
oh my God, I just had like the biggest epiphany listening to you say that. Yeah. Because my husband always thinks that like secretly I'm a lesbian because I love women so much, right? He's like, oh, whatever. He's so annoying. But I think that what he sees and what I think I've always just kind of like not really realized until just this moment is that I love being with my girlfriends and women because I get to have that piece of me like unapologetically, right? Like I don't have to be in control. I could just, this is just it. This is it. Yes.
And I think, we need to have all sides of ourselves. We need the feeding of all sides of ourselves, right? So when you're with your girlfriends and you're able to tap into that feminine energy, that's probably how they need and want you to show up. And then you hold space for them, and then they're holding space for you. So y'all are just pouring into each other. So you feel, and you have this unspoken understanding of one another, right? We have this unspoken language when we don't have to say a word, right? And I think there's something to be said for that, right? But you need all the other things too, like your partner relationship is, spousal or partner relationship is super important, and you probably get something entirely different from that. And then you get something entirely different when you're a woman at the decision-making table, right? And it's celebrating all the pieces and parts you get. Showing up as a parent for your child fills another place in your heart. So you have all these little places in your heart, and you want to show up as the best version of yourself in each one of them. But it takes practice. It's not easy. No one ever gets it right. We just learn as we go, right? Because we're always thrown a new challenge, or we've got a new personality in the mix in our workforce, or things aren't going as planned with our spouse or partner, and we need to work through some things. Our child is going through whatever there's the many seasons our children go through, and it requires something different of you. So we're just, in our house, we call it WHIP. It's work in progress. We're all just humans, and we're all just works in progress.
Oh my God, that's so kind of graceful. At my house, in my world, I call it whack-a-mole.
Whack-a-mole.
What's the whack-a-mole? It's just whack-a-mole every other day. What's new that I got to figure out today?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And life is a little bit of that too, Katrina. I mean, it really is. And we've all been there, and it's getting through that season, whatever that season is for you. And then before you know it, there's a new season in front of you, or your children have grown and they're bringing new challenges, and you have to change the way you show up as a parent. I mean, I have a 26-year-old, you've got one that's under 2. So what is needed of you versus what is needed of me are two completely different things. Like, mine needs me to be here when he needs me, but he doesn't need me on the daily, right? Which is a whole transition to go through. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And yours she just wants to hug you, right? She just wants to love on her mama, which is it's so beautiful to watch, because I remember those days, but that's what she needs from you in this moment. And we just, we go along in life and we figure it out. But the thing that's most important, I think, is surrounding yourself with people that elevate you, who challenge your way of thinking in a good way, creating an environment where you can be reflective and really look back at, what's happened and how you can maybe show up the same way or differently or slightly differently moving forward. But it requires space. You have to create space to have a mentor-mentee relationship. You have to create space for your girlfriend time. You've got to create space for your professional circle of women time, and you've got to create space for just you and yourself in your car for a good cry or a good laugh or a good scream or a holy shit, what am I going to do? I've got no idea what I'm going to do with this problem, right? And that is what we have to do. It's about that space that we create for ourselves, and we're in control of that more than I think we often think we are, right? We feel like we're a passenger in our life. We're actually in the driver's seat. We just have to, manage life instead of life managing us.
I'm looking at you going, how in the...
And honestly, Katrina, it's harder at certain times in life than it is at others. It just is, right? And we all go through our peaks and valleys, and sometimes we're better at it than others, and sometimes our demands pull us, one way or another way. And, this idea of balance, everyone's definition of balance is different. And depending on where you are in your career trajectory, depending on where you are in your season of life, it just depends on what balance looks like to you. We're never in balance, right? We're doing more over here, which means we're doing less over here. The key to it is just being aware of it, so that when you are thinking about where you're putting your energy and your time, if you want this to be a little more rich and thick and you want to spend a little less time over here, then you have to be intentional about it, right? And easier said than done, but just being aware of it is the very first step of understanding what feels out of balance. Like I've worked with a ton of women, and something that is often out of balance for them is they're giving too much to work, not enough to personal. That is just, I'm not taking care of myself, or I'm not doing the things I need to do for me because I'm giving so much of myself at work, right? Also, spirituality is another area where people feel they have this guilt and shame attached to not spending enough time in that space in their life. And it's about making small incremental changes so that you can show up in whatever space you want to be showing up in a slightly different way. It doesn't mean big sweeping changes. It means I just have to put one foot in front of the other, and I have to move in that direction, or even just lean in that direction if you're not ready to take a step. So it doesn't require a lot. It just requires a little consistently. And I think that people feel like I'm never going to get this right. I'm never going to get myself back in balance, or it feels so far away that I don't even know where to start, is, where we meet women a lot. But the reality is we have to first decide what's most important to them, and often what's most important to them is not where they're spending their time.
I would say, for me, it's just hard, right?
It's just hard.
Yeah.
But you're in a tough season,
Yeah.
You're giving so much of yourself to your daughter, which is a wonderful thing. It's the most important job that we are on this earth for, is raising our offspring, raising our daughters and our sons to be spouses and to be parents and to be community contributors. I mean, that is our number one job. So for you, leaning into that space and being able to maybe lessen your foot on the gas, take your foot off the gas a little bit in other areas of your life, that's actually a gift. As I said, at the beginning in 2009, I started my agency so I could show up in this similar way for my child, right? That was my drive for it. I knew I was helping people and I was loving what I was doing, but I also needed to make sure that my family was taken care of, and my husband was traveling 5 days a week. So
girl, I know that.
It was like, I mean, that's how I needed to show up. And if that meant I had to leave at 3:00 and be plugging away at my computer in my bed at midnight, that's what I did, because I knew that being a mom at that stage was the most important thing that I could do. I needed to be there for my son. So at the end of the day, that's where the season of life weighs in, right?
Yeah.
That's where it weighs in. And then if something is being neglected that's calling to you, then it's like, okay, I need to be doing something here that I'm not doing. What's my strategy? What's my strategy to get there?
Yeah, well, I will say, starting this podcast was like really overwhelming and daunting, but I knew I wanted to do it for 3 years. But now I'm really glad that I have done it, because I feel like this is the only time that I get like uninterrupted, like adult female time.
That's interesting.
Yeah, because frustratingly it is during my work time, but it's so hard for me to schedule like girl time or time for myself, because Tom travels so much, and Sophia never sleeps, so I'm always so damn tired, and most of my girlfriends are in your stage, right? Their kids are grown, right? Like, so they have like filled their lives out in other ways, and so trying to be like, okay, I've got 5 minutes right now.
Yeah, right.
And they're like, okay, girl.
Yeah.
I'm busy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this is great, because talk about a creative way to check a couple of boxes for you.
Yeah.
So thinking about this podcast, it truly is your passion, right? It's something you've always wanted to do. It's in the space you love to be in, and it lights you up, and you get girlfriend time on top of it, and you're connecting professionally with women who might say or inspire or spark something within you that you needed to hear at that moment, right? So I'm just thinking about the podcast, and I'm just thinking, Katrina, it's a check for you.
Yeah.
And so what a beautiful thing that you're putting together to help other women see the stories of other women and know what's possible. I think it's just, the whole premise of it is incredible. But I love what it does for you at this season of your life.
Yeah, thank you. I think I desperately need it.
It's amazing.
Yeah, because like literally, there are some days, right? Like, if I don't have client meetings, the only people I talk to are my nanny, Sophia, and Tom. And sometimes I prefer that he talk less. Right. We literally were on vacation, had like 3 days together, uninterrupted, and I needed to just be like,
yeah,
right? And he'll just talk to fill the space.
Yeah, right.
And I don't know why he does that. I think I don't know if it's a man thing or not, but he's just like talking to fill the space, and like he'll say things, I'm just like, oh, you're being really annoying. So I looked at him and I literally said, if you talked less, we'd probably get along a lot better. And he literally said, well, you're not talking at all. I was like, why do we have to talk? Can we just enjoy?
Just be.
Being in this historic city, right? Like, can we just enjoy the quiet time watching our daughter dance in her stroller as we walk down the street?
Yeah.
Can we just have peace, right? Because like, I'm the one that has the emails and the, Sophia, which I'm really, again, I am very grateful for the opportunity to be at home with her. Although with a couple of the new hires that I have and working together, because they've been working here, I do realize I do miss that very much, having an office and, like being with other, women, and they're younger, right? So like being in that mentor role, I really miss that.
And the collaboration that comes with that too, and the ideas and the innovation, and there's no substitute for being in a group of women, right? Especially in the professional space. I think there's just no substitute for it. And I think great ideas are born out of the minds and the multiple lenses of women when you put them together in a group environment.
Yeah, I totally agree. But having that, and then the baby who's in my office multiple times a day because she wants to see her mom, and I never want to be like, get out of here, I'm busy. Never, ever going to be me. But I've got that, and then I'm up all night long with her screaming and crying like last night. I don't know what the hell was going on with her. She was up from 1 to 5 o'clock this morning. Had to get in my bed at 2, and then she's pulling my hair, and then Tom wonders why I just don't want to talk.
Right. You're just trying to function. You're just trying to get through. You're trying to put together a sentence, let alone be able to say it out loud, right?
But like, that's the thing that, like you said earlier, like there's just so much that's expected of us all the time, right? Like, and today, my mom and I have talked about this a couple of times, She goes, I don't know, what to say to you, because when you guys were little, when you didn't sleep, I would sleep during the day because I didn't work. Right. She's like, but you're running a business.
Yes. Yeah.
She's like, so I don't even know what to say to you. I'm like, yeah, Mom.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to exist right now.
Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard, and it's hard because there are so many demands placed upon us, and then honestly, there are additional demands that we place on ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And we do the shoulds and the have tos, and then there's the shame and the guilt and all the things that come along with the things that aren't getting our time and attention, right? So it's really about being intentional, and I think for you are absolutely 1000% being intentional with where your time is going. And it feels good to you, as it should, right? Because you're showing up for your daughter in a way that she'll remember for the rest of her life. And she'll need less of you as she grows older, right? In a good way, where you'll be able to sit back and watch her being independent, and you'll be proud because you'll be like, I helped her build the confidence that is, helping her manage this conflict on the playground, or manage this conflict in middle school, or communicate clearly and effectively when she's having a problem with a teacher in high school or a professor in college. Like, you're part of all of those things. And even when our kids don't need us as much, and we've done the best job that we can do from where we are, it's just such a gift to watch them grow into young adults. And, me being on the other side of it, I cannot tell you how proud I am of Keegan, of how he shows up and how he solves problems, and his, the logic that he uses, and how he threads things he learned as a child through to his adulthood and can articulate that. Like, I learned this from you, so in this situation I thought I would say this because it sounded good. It's what I mean, but I think I can get what I'm looking for if I do this. What do you think? Like, those are the collaborative conversations that we're having when, as a 26-year-old, to his 52-year-old mother, So it's hard and joyful and wonderful, and sometimes feels terrible, and all the feelings, right? But we love them no matter what, and every season brings something special. Except for there are these moments that I see of Sophia. It's so interesting, because I feel like before I got pregnant and before COVID, right? Because there was a little weird space and time in COVID, right? Like, I felt like I really found my balance. Oops, that's probably gonna be loud in the mic. But like, I felt my balance as like, being able to balance who I was personally and professionally, because I felt like, I was spending so much time on my spirituality and myself that like, I felt like I'd gotten out of a bunch of businesses that were just like a lot, and I was, letting go of all the board seats I was on, and the need to be all these things all the time to all these people, and I was really just focusing on me, right? And like, I really was operating always from this place of love, light, and kindness in that space, which felt so good all the time. And then I got pregnant and sleep deprived, and I wondered where the hell that woman went, because I want Sophia to have that, right? That kindness, that love, and not the, God, there's this meme that I've seen, or video I've seen on Instagram where, like, the mom is like, so gentle and kind with her child, and then she turns the dog and she goes, which is exactly me. I understand.
Exactly me. And Sophia, it's so funny. I literally just said this the other day. Oh my God, I hate this. Like, you see, she's sweet and she's kind.
She is.
But she also yells at the dog.
Does she yell at the dog? Yes, right? Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure she says shit, which, isn't great, but whatever. I'm gonna live with it.
You know what? It's and she'll outgrow that too. That key, she will. It's hard, Katrina. I mean, it really is. And they're beautiful when they're little, and when they're discovering everything is new to them, right? And you see their little brain. I had the privilege of being able to see Sophia this morning before we shot the podcast and give her a hug. She gave me a hug. I felt so honored. But she's so smart, and her wheels are turning, and you can just see her observing and soaking things in, and it's just incredible. Like you almost can just see the cog going in her brain, and she's a really special, sweet child.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's why Girlfriend never sleeps, because those little wheels just never stop.
Right, they keep turning.
Oi.
Yeah.
Oi. But it is so funny to watch her. It is really funny to watch her size up a situation.
Yes,
right.
She does.
And what I really love is that she sees energy so clearly, right? Because she went to you and hugged you pretty quick.
Yeah, she did. It took her just a second. The dogs were still barking, and there was a lot happening, and we were saying hello, and she was doing something else when I arrived, and so she needed a minute, right?
Yeah.
She gave herself the space that she needed to be ready for the hug, which is super interesting, right?
Yeah. So I guess being where you are and what you've been working on and like what you're doing with women now, do you think that this next generation coming up, like Sophia, do you think that those women will be able to lead with their femininity and not feel like most of us, like myself, did, as they're entering into whatever phase of their life as they get bigger, bring the femininity and not feel like they have to have that masculine energy all the time. Like I still know some women that I think they're roughly my age that still just bring that masculine energy all the time.
Yes.
Like all the time. Like, I don't know if she'll hear this or not, and I'm not going to say who she is, but there was a woman who I met when I first moved down here, and I rubbed her the wrong way hard.
Okay.
She brought the masculine energy I was feeling, but looking back, I'm able to look at where I was in my life, feeling like super insecure. I'm in a new market, like I don't know anybody. I'm coming off of COVID. I just got married. All the things are new, right?
Right.
I'm 40, essentially 40, entering a new market for my business, and just in a weird space, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't really like it here, but I want to. And that rubbed this woman like the wrong way, and she like bit my head off. And she always has this like really masculine energy, but like looking at it, I felt really off put by it because of where I was, right. Like instead of looking at it the lens, well, I kind of just insulted this woman's like love of her hometown,
right?
Even though I did follow by saying I want to love it here, but months later, of course, this is so Katrina-esque. While I was in labor, I was sitting in a meeting, a leading ladies meeting. In fact, I was literally in labor in a committee meeting going, sorry I was late, ladies, I'm in labor. I'm dripping sweat. I wasn't having really any contractions yet. And they were all like, oh my God. But, I didn't know I shouldn't be driving. Right. I didn't know. I don't know what to expect. Anyway, but by the end, I'm leaving the meeting, and, when the meeting was over, and, we're hugging, right? The same woman.
Right.
But I do still feel like she brings a very masculine energy.
Yeah.
And, I actually had that kind of a similar conversation with her. We got coffee, I don't know, a while back. And she said it just feels like she has to have this wall up, right? And she is in a really, I think, tough industry. And I'm not going to say what it is, but I think she is in a really tough industry because, women often kind of like branch out from it and can take from where they start.
Okay.
But I do feel like there are a lot of women that still feel like they have to bring that masculine energy, and I just wonder all the time, right?
Right.
And I just wonder if the next generation is still going to feel that way.
Yeah, well, I think we hold some of the responsibility to teach the next generation that they can show up as their authentic selves. If you think back just 20 years ago, no one was having a conversation about showing up as your authentic self, right? And
or even 5 years ago, really.
True. Yes. And so I think, as women, we hold some of that responsibility. And, I think that by showing a different way, like by modeling the behavior. I mean, we can tell people anything, but we really have to show them, right? We have to show them how it's done. And different people have different degrees of masculinity and femininity, and that's what makes the world go around. And that's why the world is a beautiful place, because everybody is a little bit different. It's just, again, finding that sweet spot for you. And when you think you have to show up a particular way, it's just a wonderful question to ask yourself is, do I really have to, right? Do I have to, or is there another way? I was working with a client yesterday and we were talking about, conflict and that, how I show up is sometimes for people a conflicting, I can't really show this side of myself in the workplace because it's primarily male and I need to be able to get decisions and let them know I'm in charge. And, so you kind of have this little bit of both and this battle between, your sides of yourself on how you're going to show up. But the interesting thing is if you focus on the path forward, like how can I find a way to honor myself and show up in my feminine and my masculine and still be all the things that I need to be. And, what I find is that if you're a female and you're showing up in that, large and in charge masculine self, you tend to attract more of that. And when you soften your edges just ever so slightly, it changes the dynamic of the culture and the conversation because you're leading the organization. So, as people say, it travels from the top down. So how you show up really matters. And because it travels from the top down, we have a responsibility to these next generation of women and teaching them that they can use their femininity in a way, because the world really truly needs more of that right now. We need more love, light, and kindness. The world needs more love, light, and kindness. And if we can soften our edges, be intentional with our feminine spirit and lean into our values and bring that level of professionalism inside of organizations, whether it's our own organization or whether we're working for a large, medium, small company, we really can make a difference. And something my coach said to me many years ago, and I'll never forget it. She said, it's all about people. If you really think about it, it's people. So I'm a person, I'm a human. The people who report to me are also humans. The people I serve are humans, they're people. My vendors and my outside professional relationships, my community work, it's all about people, right? And I think sometimes we lose sight of that. And we lose sight of the fact that we need to be able to be a bit of a chameleon and meet people where they are. If we soften our edges, people might be invited to show up in a different way in our own workforce or have a conversation that's been lingering for them that's holding them back, right? Maybe they're stuck, but they don't have the courage to have the conversation. If you create that space for that person, you never know how you can positively influence their life. So, there's a lot of talk about femininity, and I was listening to a podcast on my way in from Georgia yesterday, and it was actually a really interesting podcast, and they were talking about intimacy, and they were talking about the definition of the word intimacy and how it can mean so many different things in so many different environments. Like, I create an intimate space for women executive leaderships to meet. That intimate word means something completely different to other people, right? And so we have to think about femininity in the same way, right? We are conditioned to believe that femininity is this. We're conditioned to believe that masculinity is this. But what is your definition of femininity that's comfortable, true to you, and authentic to the person that you are on the inside?
I love that. I really do. And I don't know, I think annoyingly, there's still so many negative phrases around being a woman or being feminine that, particularly that men use, like, right. Oh, you're being such a girl. Or,
right.
Your ovaries are showing.
Right. Lovely. That's a good, I've never heard that one.
No.
No. that's a fun one.
That is actually really funny, and I've used it. I've used it. I hate to say it, but I have.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I feel like there are still so many like negative things around being feminine or womanly or kind. It literally is just so strange to me how that like has materialized in society and in the world, right? Like how in the hell did women become such servient beings and like such a negative thing? How did that happen?
Right. And meanwhile, you know, we have the power to give birth to a child, right?
I really mean this when I say that, like, I always thought I was like cool and powerful before becoming a mother, but now that I'm a mother, I'm like, holy shit, women really are absolute superheroes.
Yeah, they're amazing.
Like our bodies literally split in half to bring a child into the world.
It's amazing. And I think, you know, for us, I really feel like once you define and you find that sweet spot and how you're showing up, you know, it's okay to have boundaries. And if someone is sharing, you know, you're being overly emotional or your ovaries are showing, like, that just blows my mind. You know, I feel like it's okay for us to say that's not okay.
Yeah.
Like, that's not okay. Like, not okay. You know, I'm trying to be vulnerable with you, or I'm trying to connect with you, or I'm trying to create a space for us to have a conversation about a challenging situation. That comment doesn't belong here, right?
Yes, it does not.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
As my husband is shaking something outside that we can clearly hear.
Is that what
yes!
I was like, what is that noise? My husband would tell you that's my favorite question, by the way. What's that noise? Yeah. Actually, my favorite question is, what are you trying to accomplish? That's my favorite question. But he would say, it's
there's
what's that
a little
noise?
nugget I'm going to take away.
Ooh, yeah.
What are you trying to accomplish?
Right. Yeah. It's my absolute favorite question. It solves so many things. It really does. And it creates space for you to explore what it is you're trying to accomplish before you enter into a difficult conversation, when you're collaborating, when you're negotiating. I mean, it just is a universal, wonderful sentence that can be used to find common ground with other humans.
Well, are you asking yourself that question or someone else?
Both.
Yeah.
Both, right? Yeah, what am I trying to accomplish, right? Taking a minute to step back and say, okay, this is not going as planned. What am I trying to accomplish here? Okay, is there a better path? Is there another way, right? But also asking other people, because you're seeking to understand, right? If we don't understand what someone else is trying to say, or they've said it and we're creating a story around what they've said, so we're creating a belief system that we're not even sure is true, like, we're not going to find the common ground. So, you know, what are you trying to accomplish? Tell me what you're trying to get at, and then let's see if we can find a way to do it together, right? And it's just a super powerful question. And I actually used that question in the workshop that I taught for the Statesville Leading Ladies at this recent event, and we talked about that question because you can use it from a business strategic planning perspective, right? Like making sure that you're understanding what it is you're trying to do, because oftentimes we just jump to the do, and the do is not in line with, what it is that we are trying to accomplish. So recentering and getting acquainted with, what's our goal, what's our objective here, and then let's make sure that the steps we're taking are in true alignment with that objective.
Do you say affirmations in the morning? I just have to know, because like I literally, as you're saying these things, I'm like, God, I really feel like I feel like I need to. You should have written that down already.
We'll write it down when we're done.
That little gold nugget. But like, and immediately, and it's so, God, every time I think of like people saying affirmations, despite the fact that I am like in this big spiritual place, and I feel like sometimes you need to tell these things to yourself, and I've been through a ton of therapy, my brain automatically goes back to the SNL skit with this Stewart. Have you ever seen that? Where he's like in the mirror saying like, I'm strong, but it's like, he's like being made fun of for like having that sort of like self pep talk to get like, that is what our society has been built on. That's like so terrifying to me. And I feel like it's still very much in our space. Like that's very much our everyday.
Yeah. It's interesting. I had dinner with a client friend, female executive last night, and affirmations came up at the dinner table. And, I talk about bookending your day, where you have your ritual and your routine in the morning, and you have your ritual and your routine in the evening. And, part of my ritual and routine does not include affirmations in the morning, but for me, it's meditation and gratitude, because that just happens to serve me. But the woman I had dinner with last night just really made me think about something. And she said, I'm really writing out these affirmations, and then texted me this morning and said, I wrote this affirmation for you, and texted it to me. And I was like, and it was so beautiful. It was such a beautiful affirmation. And so as I was driving here, I was like, maybe that is something that I use to bookend the front end of my day. If I add even just one in, again, taking one small step, right? I do my gratitude in the morning. I send my text messages and emails to people who come up for me in the morning and thank them for whatever it is I'm grateful for. And but I could very easily incorporate that in, and you can change it up for whatever it is that you need a little boost. I'm writing a book, and this is how it came up in conversation last night. And the woman I was having dinner with was writing a book, and so we were having this discussion, and she's like, I write an affirmation that my book is already written. And I'm like, wow, that's incredible. Like, didn't dawn on me. So we take from others what we need to hear in the moment. Like I could say 10 things to you today, and then 10 months from now, and you would pull something different because you need to hear something different from me 10 months from now that didn't resonate with you today. So again, that community of women and surrounding yourself with people, having deep, wonderful, thick, rich conversations is so important in our lives.
Yeah, I think so. Because I was literally thinking to myself, it would probably serve me well if I said to myself every day, what am I trying to accomplish?
Yeah, right.
But then I thought to myself, well, most days I'm just trying to wonder if I can get down a cup of coffee, and what are the things I have to do before my nanny gets here?
Right.
Where's Sophia running off to?
Right.
Did she pee through her sleep sack?
Right. And so maybe you use that question more sparingly. Like, I need to have a difficult conversation, and I really need to sit and think about what I would like this outcome to be. What am I trying to accomplish? It doesn't mean you have to ask yourself that question every day. It just means you can use that question as a tool in your tool belt to help you find common ground when you're collaborating with other people. I mean, it's a super powerful tool in collaboration. It's also a great reflective tool. Maybe you go to a client appointment, or you're preparing for a client appointment, and you're saying, this is a brand new client. I've had a 20-minute conversation with them. They've asked me to, dive a little deeper. What am I trying to accomplish here in this next meeting with them? I want to, do a deep dive into their business. I want to be able to really discern what it is that they need, and then I want to be able to follow up with a proposal. Okay, if that's what you're trying to accomplish, and then from their perspective, when you enter into the meeting, you're trying to understand what they're trying to accomplish, because you're a consultant and you need to know that in order to be able to put together a strong proposal that's going to deliver the results that they're looking for, right?
Yeah.
So it's just like, it's powerful on both sides. And if it doesn't work in your daily practice, put it in your tool belt and use it as necessary.
Yeah, I miss being able to meditate daily.
Yeah, and some days I'm better at it than others. Some days I can give it 5 minutes. Some days I can give it 2 minutes. But, I always try to give it at least 1 minute. And the gratitude piece for me, oftentimes the gratitude comes from the meditation. So one feeds the other.
Yeah, my spiritual healer says that to me all the time. I mean, I call her my spiritual healer. I don't really know exactly how she would classify herself these days, but she's my fairy godmother, basically. Even though she's
wonderful. It sounds wonderful.
Yeah. She said that I probably should do that regularly. It might help me, be in a better headspace most days. Because, when you're this freaking sleep deprived, when you get like 4 hours of sleep regularly, and, you got to run a full business, and, you got to be a mom, you got to be a wife, and you got a dog that's dying, and a puppy that never stops barking, and, all the freaking things, right?
Yes.
And, you have your own team you got to manage, and all your clients, and your nanny, and some days it's just like, geez Louise. And she's like, well, you should find something to be grateful for. I'm like, that I got out of bed. No.
I got out of bed.
She's like, it could be simple as that. I was like, God, I wish I could be this so centered like you are right now.
It's interesting. My gratitude used to be on my commute into my office. I had a commute when I lived in New York. It was about 30 minutes, 40 minutes each way. And my morning commute, I didn't allow myself to turn on a podcast, turn on any music until I did my gratitude. So I did it in the car while I was driving, and that served me for years. And then COVID happened and I wasn't driving. And I found that I was in this space, like COVID was such a wonderful thing for people who were able to find their balance. Like I have several clients that are like, I want to go back to COVID life because I was the best version of myself I've been to date during that period of time. And for others of us who, either crave and need that in-person connection and Zoom doesn't serve them in the same way, or you used your car time to and from work to be productive in ways that served you, there was this whole void. So I had to rework how I bookend my day because it wasn't the same for me anymore. It just was, and it still isn't. And I work from home, and I feel blessed to work from home. And I travel a lot, so I use my car time, my windshield time to really think about things. But I don't get enough of it. I used to get it every day on the front and the back end, and then in between client appointments, I would get it too. So I had a lot of car time, and a lot of people would complain about that. I feel like for me, it served me. On the way home, I would listen to my husband would say she's reading another book, but I would audible my books, and I would blow through 20 books a year, and
I miss reading.
And I right, me too. And I don't do it. I don't do it as often as I did before. But like the whole way down here, I'm podcasting. I'm switching back and forth between books and podcasts, and there's just so much great stuff out there in the universe. It's like you almost don't have enough time to consume it all. I don't feel like I have to. I try to focus on what's calling to me and really plug into those types of things, and then the message and whatever I'm listening to is what I need in that moment.
Yeah, I love that. I miss having that time too.
Yeah.
That commute, my commute has, unless I was commuting into my office in the city, New York City, I would walk to work.
Right.
I was only ever a couple blocks from my office, which was amazing.
Yeah. So you're outside, getting sunshine, have your, AirPods in, listening to whatever, whether it's your, morning mix or whatever it is.
Back then it was literally, I'd be walking, it's beautiful.
Yeah, right. No AirPods.
Yeah. I was like so much more at peace.
Yeah.
But I will say, despite my missing sometimes the Northeast, my husband and I literally talked about this last week, and he was very tearful over the fact that we've moved down here because he feels like he's afraid that we've made a mistake moving so far away from our families. And I don't. Yeah. I feel like I have just been so blessed with so many women that I've met here. Like up in the Northeast, like I knew women, right? But they were much older, right? Like I did all the things that people were doing, when their families have gone and grown, right?
Right.
And like I feel like down here there's just like such a different mix, right? And I'm meeting more women that are in my age range, and like I don't know, they're just different. They're just different down here.
Yeah, and I think North Carolina is such a melting pot of people from everywhere, which I love because you get all these really interesting perspectives. And as I visited with your nanny this morning, I've heard a lot about how amazing she is. But the minute I chatted with her, I'm like, oh, she's definitely not. Yeah, she's definitely not from here, right? Yeah. And I remember there's a cute little breakfast place when my husband and I lived here that we used to go, and they had mugs, and just random mugs that said random things on them. And so one day I asked the waitress, I said, so like, do y'all decide who gets what mug? Like, because I'm wondering if like you're giving me a message when you're handing me the mug. Like, am I being judged? Am I being like whatever? And she's like, oh, truth? I said, truth. She goes, yes. And I was like, okay, so now every time I walked into this restaurant, I'm like buckled up for what mug was going to be handed to me because I felt like they're giving me a message. And one day they handed me a mug that said, I love New York. And I'm like, what's this for? And they're like, because, ma'am, you have an accent. I'm like, oh, I guess I do.
Yep.
I guess I do. But it was cute. It was a cute little, we never knew what we were going to get. And it depended on what was left on the counter too. So, there were some days it was slim pickings and we'd get something and we'd be like sideways. And she's like, it's all right. Your mug's already out. Okay. All right. Okay.
There are definitely some things I really do love about being down here.
Yeah. People are nice. People wave. Your neighborhood or another. I'm driving into your neighborhood and somebody's getting their mail out of her box and I'm like, wow, hi. Who's that lady from with Georgia plates? So anyway, yeah, there's a lot of good things about the South besides the weather. The people are, genuinely, I think they're fairly kind, know.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
So as much as I would love to keep this going all day, why don't you tell me one thing that you hope women will take away from our conversation today?
Yeah. There's so many things. One thing. What I really would love is for women to recognize that they're not alone and that they should give themselves grace and create space for them to either be with other professional women, be with themselves, and create just some quiet time so they have time to reflect. I really think that's important. I think the masculinity and femininity, part of our conversation is really important, but it's so individual for each person to find that balance within themselves. So if you create the space to think about that concept, maybe you can play with some thoughts and find, something that feels good to you in terms of balance. But absence of the space for thinking and thought and innovation is not going to get you anywhere, right, on any of the concepts. So I think it's really important, and we've got to give ourselves permission to have that space and not apologize for it, actually. We work in our business often, and we don't pull ourselves back so that we can work on our business or work on ourselves or, put ourselves out there in environments that might make us uncomfortable but will help us grow. Like all of those things, it's all about creating space.
I love that. I love that. Well, thank you for joining us. If you're listening or watching, I really appreciate you joining me on this journey of telling all these wonderful women's stories. And Amy, why don't you tell whoever might be joining us or listening how they can find you?
Sure. So amychristieson.com is my website. I do have a free community that you can join called Elevate. And really the premise behind Elevate is just a place off of social media where you can connect with other lifelong learners, like-minded individuals, other leaders, where you can get some inspiration. We have success stories and interviews in that space. It's free to join and anyone can join that group. So there's a link to that on the website. Also, our Women's Executive Leadership Program, the Women's Executive Leadership Retreat, like we talked about earlier. Those are programs that I'm currently enrolling in the Buffalo market, and we're getting ready to launch in the Charlotte market too, which is super exciting. So if you are a female executive leader at the decision-making table for your company and you're interested, there's information on my website for that as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming,
Thank you.
Amy, especially making the drive.
My pleasure. Absolutely my pleasure.
The girlfriend. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.